Good evening and welcome to Maryville Connects. My name is Sister Catherine Ryan. I'm pleased to serve at Maryville Academy, and I am delighted this evening that we have as our guest our Chief Information Officer, John Falsetti. Welcome,
Hi.
John.
Thank you, Sister.
This time together, we'd like to focus on protections for young people in using the computer. Well, the protections are also for those of us that aren't as young, what John is going to tell us, but to help families with some of the ways that we can handle computers, internet, cyberspace, and of course how organizations are trying to do the same. So I'm going to begin by asking you, John, what are some of the biggest threats right now for young people using either computers or devices that are computer devices?
So it's kind of multi-layer, but we'll talk about the obvious stuff where kids, whether they're, let's say, 6 to 10, 12, and then the ones that are in high school, it's sort of two different types of threats that come through, and to the families that are there. All right, so there's the threats of just general phishing attacks that families have to worry about.
Phishing, how do you spell that?
It's a P-H-P-H.
I-S-H.
P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G. So phishing, what it means is it sort of has to do with sort of like when you throw your pole out to fish. And that's what bad actors do from the outside. And they try to lure you in, using another phishing metaphor, to be able to click on something that's been sent to you. And they're getting very sophisticated. And, you know, we've all read about things that happen with this. And this can really cause some problems within families and large organizations, as we know, that we've read. So what that really means is there's tailored emails going to somebody in your family that's based on, and they get this information based on your social media activity, whether it's a Facebook account or things of that sort, and they know who you are, they know kind of what you're doing. They even go into LinkedIn with, let's say, a children's parents and things of that sort, what they do, and they'll tailor something that says, oh, look, you know, mom and dad work here or something like that, and if you click on this, you could win, you know, I'm just bringing it up, you know, a trip to Disney World. All right, so they're aiming it for that population, and you know, once somebody clicks, they start luring them in a little more to say, boy, you know, if you really want to get into this drawing, get your mom and dad's credit card and type in this number, and they're going to be so excited. And they got really, really good at it, and you know, it's so much different than stranger danger, right? When we were kids and being talked about it, because there were certain rules with it that can make it obvious, but now they're getting so sophisticated in being able to articulate this and getting the kids to be able to click on this and give information that they shouldn't.
So parents, what parents, family members, we need to do for young people, what do we tell them if they see one of these alluring emails where they're invited to click on something, but it's an unexpected email, they don't know the source? What should we tell them?
So it's a series, it's training. We can't tell them one thing. So there's products out there, and I won't name them, but there's plenty of products out there for educating ourselves and our kids, and how to educate us to educate our kids on being able to look for these certain things and sort of just basic rules of engagement. So if you're sitting down and talking with your kids, and you need to do that, everyone needs to do that, about where they are on the internet and what they're doing, because of a bunch of other reasons too. But if we're just talking about the phishing attacks and trying to get personal information, there's training out there, and if you Google it, training, you know, for being just cybersecurity aware for families, there's going to be a plethora of items that come up with. Some are free, some aren't. And really what it comes down to is being able to identify how to look at something when it comes in and what to do and not to do. So for example, real quick, if there's some basic items to give your kids when you're talking to them, if you get an email, little Bobby, and it's asking for information that you don't have, or even your phone number, don't put it in. Ask us first. And then there's the other, they could go deeper and deeper into it, and the kids are going to get this because they're so tech savvy, is don't click on it until you hover over it. So if they're 10, 12, especially if they're teenagers, it's going to be clear that this isn't Disney.com, it's something other than that. And if it is something other than exactly what you're looking for, don't do it. So in doubt, don't click. And that's some of the main ideas to be able to give these kids for that.
And now, what if it's not coming as a message from an email, but John, the young person gets a text with a similar kind of pitch? Is that also a danger?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really new now. Mm-hmm. That they're just going through phone numbers, and AI, if we want to bring that up, artificial intelligence, is looking at these, and they're just pumping text out to hundreds of thousands of phone numbers. And they're just waiting for something to come back. So if a text is, would you like this new video game? Mm-hmm. And obviously the number's not going to have, and they don't do it yet anyway. It's just a phone number. It's not somebody that you would know, like, Aunt Mary or something like that. And the best thing for parents to tell their kids is, if there's a phone number in there that's not in your contacts, do not reply, ever. But sometimes that's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. So if they do reply, they really need to go through the same set of tools same set of instructions that we said before. That if you don't know them, don't click. If they send you something else, if they're asking for your email, if they're asking for personal information, just ask mom and dad. But it's a cat and mouse game. They get so good at it. They know if the first couple of questions is, oh, how old are you? 10. They just know, the AI knows what to do with that then, compared to 25, mm-hmm. let's say. And it takes it down a whole different route.
Well, that's scary enough.
Right.
But you alluded to the fact there's more dangers out there, or more ways of cyber attacks. Can you tell us another one that parents should be watching out for with their young people? So
for teenagers, and ones that are even young adults, that, these dating apps and things of that sort, not that I want to go deep into them, we don't have to, but everybody in that age group knows the word catfishing. And that's if somebody's like, oh, look, I really need a date for Friday night, and they're putting it out there just on their social media. This is another thing. If it's public, the AI starts going through that and gets back and say, oh, I'm available. And, I'd really like to get to know you first. And it goes through that whole scenario. And because there's pictures involved, and, oh, yeah, I know where you live. Oh, I'm only 3 blocks away. It goes through all of this. And, at a young age, they're just being naive, and they think it's fun, and they start giving up that kind of information again. And once they have that kind of information, and they start drawing on kind of heartstrings or emotional strings, people, they're trying to get to the end result that they really want, and it's a date for Friday night. Oh. And that's just another awareness thing. That it's really the education before something like that happens is so important.
It is, and we've heard the terrible stories of persons who've used that entree to our young folks, especially teenagers, who then lure them into all kinds of other dangerous situations. Yes. So we certainly want to protect our children, whatever age they are, from these kinds of dangerous attacks that are almost faceless.
Right.
Danger, even if they send false photos, almost dangerous attacks, but they put our children at
right.
risk.
Of course, if they say, oh, let's meet at the movie theater, mm-hmm. Or McDonald's down the block, then you could really get into some trouble, right? God forbid, trafficking, things of that sort, obviously. So the education is there. It needs to be taken really serious by the parents, and seek out the training. My guess is even your local school district and your local library is going to have a lot of resources for this. It's just the new reality that we all have to deal with.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit. We'll probably come back to this if we have time, but I want to make sure we cover another topic. We're all hearing about cyber attacks on institutions,
Yes.
On financial institutions, on healthcare institutions, on local governments or large governments. So, John, can you talk to us about how that happens? And then after that, I'll ask you what can be done to protect against it.
Okay, so to protect 100% is near impossible, but you can mitigate it quite a bit. So the three legs to a stool is really a good analogy for trying to really mitigate an institution's vulnerability to cyber attacks. The first one being what they call endpoint protection, and that means your PC itself and other items.
Personal computer.
Personal computer, thank you. Yeah, your personal computer that's on your desk at work. And also, they call it the Internet of Things. And what that means is other items that are hooked to the internet that are not necessarily a computer. Could be from a thermostat and all these other things that really don't have built-in cybersecurity. And those are the items, what they call in the local area network, not the internet, that's inside of the interconnectivity that's inside your institution. These are the types of things that need to be isolated as best they can from folks getting into it from the outside. And I won't get into those details. But endpoint security is basically what, like our malware software, antivirus software, to make sure that's up to date on the PCs that are running, and where you're diligent about updating those things. So that's leg number one, to take care of things internally. Leg number two is threats from the outside. And this is another where AI's really stepped up its game in a good way. Where there's software that runs that checks everything coming in and out of an institution via email, because that's where 90-something% of these phishing attacks happen, if not more. And this AI system will look at your patterns. So for example, sister, if I send you a report every Thursday, and it's always in Microsoft Word, and I attach it and send it to you, and I do that every Thursday, it starts learning my behavior. And then I send one that has the exact same thing, but it's an Excel attachment. These systems will know, you know what, we're going to hold that one back until it's approved to let go, because this is really outside of the behavior of John. And they look at that on an institutional level too, who you're sending documents in back. And that really helps, because I know it's helped us quite a bit, where it's really brought down the instances where people get a phishing attack, and then we have to rely on their personal knowledge of how to go through that. So it's another layer. And then the third leg is what we talked about before, is awareness. That, and all three are important. If you miss one of them, that your likelihood of getting an attack is much higher, where you're actually subjected to it. So that's the awareness of going through items that are out there. Institutions pay for just the cybersecurity training that's online, just to bring the awareness up.
So I'm a business. I spend a lot of money on security, and all of a sudden, I've been hacked. How does that happen with all of these three stools being protected?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a definitive answer for that, but there's no such thing as 100% in anything, and the same thing with cybersecurity. So it doesn't mean that you're getting attacked and the whole thing's down. So we could talk about this a little bit. On inside networks, to be able to segregate sections of it, where if a hacker gets in and gets an admin password, and that's really what it comes down to, what could they do with it? And what they did before, years ago, when this wasn't such a threat, there was one admin password, and you use it for multiple things. You use it to back up your systems. You use it to modify systems that you're working on for, let's say, electronic medical record. And you're using the same password for other things. Now, the best way to do it is, there is no global password that's really been put out there. It's a dozen different if you want to say, semi-administrative passwords, but that are just doing a very thin slice of the work there. So if one gets compromised and you find out about it, you sort of wall off the others.
Okay.
There's a potential for that, and that's what institutions do. And if you don't, then you could be vulnerable to it bringing down the entire organization.
So when this happens, I know that if I'm shopping with a store and someone gets my credit card information because they've been hacked, or a financial institution, healthcare, wherever, I get a notice. I'm supposed to get a notice that says, we've had a problem and your information may have been compromised. They say it in a different way than that, but that's the message. And then as consumers, what should we do, John?
So if you do get that information, the best thing to do is just call your bank and cancel your credit cards and get brand new numbers. It sort of walls off, to use that same term again, what happened the day before and what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's not even, it's a good idea too, every 3 or 4 years, even though you've got to go through, if you have auto payments and your iPass for going through the expressway and things of that sort, you got to make sure those are changed. But just change your credit card numbers every couple years, just because there's something could have been stolen that's non-published, because they don't know yet. Sometimes if somebody, an organization gets compromised, they don't even realize it till months later, and those are all being sold then on the dark web.
Well, so now you brought up another topic that I need to make sure and ask you about. What is the dark web?
So the dark web it's basically another part of the internet that is not published. They purposely don't publish anything. If you Google it, it doesn't show up. I mean, if you Google dark web, you're going to get kind of conversations like we're having, but you're not going to find out sites that are bad sites. And we could get into what the bad sites are. Some of them are, from learning about terrorist activity to child trafficking. And then even more benign stuff in between, how to, cheat in some gaming things and things of that sort, right? Those could be a little more open. But how people get to them is through social media. So I'll back it up a little bit. So on your social media, that's why it should be really limited, the social media stuff from my perspective. But if somebody's putting out their interests, and their interests are, something that they wouldn't want to publish, okay? The dark web is looking at that because what you're putting out there is public. And then the dark web is looking, okay, we may have somebody here that has like and kind ideas like us. And we could go through a list of those, but we don't have to. Everyone has their list. And that's how, that's what's considered the dark web. So they would send a link saying, hey, I understand you're into this XYZ type scenario, whatever, and click on this and you could join our club. And that's what the dark web is. So there are communities within the web that are not advertised anywhere, and they kind of recruit for that.
And so if someone steals information in a cyber attack, then they put it out on the dark web. They can put it out on the dark web.
So it's really, I don't really know exactly how this works, but let's say they stole a bunch of Social Security numbers. Let's just say from X agency. They would sell those to somebody, and they're overseas and things of that sort. They'd sell those, and they don't actually, the ones who steal them actually don't do anything with them except sell them to the bad guys. It's a whole economy that's considered underground, sort of.
So for parents, for us who are watching out for children, we want to make sure that cyber attacks are not successful. But if they are, we know that this information can be stolen and misused, either by individuals who have stolen it or, as you've just said, John, by third parties out there
Yeah.
who are buying it from them. There's a lot of reasons for us to put in a lot of those protections. So I'm going to go back to what's kind of a foundational piece. You talked about passwords. Do you have some tips for our viewers on good passwords and what are less secure passwords?
So let's talk about passwords, and then what the industry started moving away from passwords and
Okay.
using biometrics. But let's talk about passwords. One thing, absolutely number one golden rule: don't ever write it down, ever, anywhere. Period. It was in the beginning. I think people really got away with it in the beginning. They put it on a little sticky note and put it under their keyboard. So just think of something that is yours and yours alone, and it's going to be something you're not going to forget. So for example, what some people do, they'll come up with a prefix that's 6 or 8 characters long, maybe with like a dash or an exclamation point in between, and then they add numbers to the end. I'm not saying that's what you do, but that gets you a way to remember it without having to ever write it down. So that's number one with passwords.
Don't use your birth date, though.
Never. Yeah. Don't use your kid's name, your birth date, your pet. Just come up with something so random that, even if it's not random, it could be your grandmother's middle name and with a special character in it, where it's just kind of not out there.
Right.
But for sure, yeah, your any birth dates, your address, your part of your phone number, none of that. And then you could stick with that because it's so unique. Mm-hmm. You could stick with it. And just, you're going to be forced to change a password, and that's where you could just use a little derivative of it that you kind of know what those derivatives mean every time you need to change it. Now, the two-factor authentication, that's another way to save yourself. So we all know that, when we're logging into our banking, every bank that's worth its salt anywhere right now has two-factor authentication. What that means is you're registered with your bank and you have your cell phone number in it. And that's primarily the way it goes. You could use an email, but use a cell phone, for example. And if you're on another device that normally doesn't log in to that website, so let's say you're on vacation and you're at your cousin's house and you just need to jump on the computer and pay a couple bills, and you don't have yours with you or things of that sort, or your phone isn't with you at the time, then it would ask you, we need to two-factor this. And obviously you would have to have your phone. You would get a text with that code and put it in there and said, oh, this is an unknown device. Are you actually logging in from Philadelphia? Yes. And then it lets you in. And that device itself is registered with it and not your login. So that's the two-factor, along with a unique password that nobody else knows, is really strong. And now they're getting into biometrics.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean?
So biometrics means you're using your fingerprint or handprint. Everybody has those on the back of their phone. And you could enable that also when you're logging into any of your institutions. Even the hospitals have it now for medical records and things of that sort. Do you want to enable your biometrics? And your phone knows who it is, iPhone or Android. You scan your thumbprint or one of your fingers, and it knows who you are based on that. And the institutions ask, do you also want to use biometrics? And if you say yes, then not only do you have to use your phone because of the two-factor authentication, says that phone's okay, but you have to use your fingerprint. So for some reason, if somebody does get your password and doesn't have your fingerprint, you're still not going to be able to get in. So it's a lot of information there.
No, a lot of lessons here. I think for those of us who want to protect children, including and ourselves, of course, but protecting our children. Number one, I think you told us, John, that parents, caretakers of any role, like grandparents who are helping out or uncles and aunts, really we should have some conversations with our children so that they understand we really care about them and want to protect them from some persons out there whom they may not be aware of. And then you talked about some ways we can do that. You talked about how these attacks come, including phishing, the phishing that's PH instead of F, ISH, ING, trying to get in. You also, I think, have helped us understand how some of these cyber attacks take place, and some protections we can use. So in the couple minutes we have left, John, any other tips for our families on how we protect our children?
Well, use the resources that are out there, or reiterate that. Go to your local library, things of that sort. But one thing I do want to bring up is that not only to protect our children, but to protect our elderly adults,
Oh, good
our
point.
families,
Good
because
point.
they're just as vulnerable. And they may even be more, because they just haven't been brought up in this era. And they trust people who phone when they answer the phone. That's another thing. The phone calls, they use that for elderly. It's not that, I know we want to talk about kids, but this is just as important.
Equally important. Go
It
ahead.
is, because they use the random phone calls, especially with landlines, because some older folks that still have a landline, that's another thing that AI figures out and says, okay. And they just use that. It's sort of a phishing. They'll call up, and let's say an old gentleman answers, and somebody on the other side say, "Grandpa, yeah, is this Frankie? Yeah, it's Frankie. I'm in trouble. Blah blah." And they go down this rabbit hole, and they get them the wire thousands of dollars overseas. I've read about this happening. It actually happened to my dad, but he didn't go down that road. It's a whole other story. But that managed to get cut off right at the end, luckily. So that awareness, our elderly folks may or may not go on the internet and seek this out or go to their local library. It's going to be up to us to make sure they're aware also, because they're starting to use they're using this technology.
These third parties, yes.
Yeah, our parents are using the technologies to do business because they're sort of forced into it.
Right.
And, they're vulnerable too. So.
Well, John, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that we can learn a lot from what John has been sharing with us, and hopefully we have lots more questions that we can bring John back for at another time. But even more positively, John is helping us think about how to protect our children, our elderly, and actually ourselves from this exciting world, cyber world, but there are some risks out there that we can't let overtake the good that it does. Thank you. Thank you for coming to Maryville Connects. We'll see you the next time.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you.